Hello, good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Dolph Janis. I'm just going to wait about 1 or 2 more minutes before we get going here for this morning. Hope you guys are enjoying the beautiful sunshine where you're located at and doing safe, sound, and healthy at the same time. Again, I'm Dolph Janis from American Retirement Institute here doing a Baby Boomer Basics webinar. It's the new age of everything that's going on with society and everything like that. And this is a nice, really good educational course with a lot of different things going on. So I hope you get to enjoy it. If you've not received, you should have received this either by mail or by email. It's the Baby Boomer Basics Workbook. It's basically a lot of the stuff in the presentation. You can take notes and follow along with all the material that we'll be going through today. So if you haven't received this, let us know. We can get a copy to you as well. Also, on the right of the handouts area, you'll see on the right of your screen, we have just a handout of the company services that we offer, as long as a 2020 tax guide, which has been very popular for a lot of people to educate themselves as well. So I'm going to take myself off the screen where we can focus on the presentation. Like I said, my name is Dolph Janis. I'll be your instructor and educator today. So in the next hour or so, we're going to cover what is important as you approach and enter into retirement, and that's the Baby Boomer Basics. It's essentially a course to cover all the things you already need to know about and be aware of as you enter this new phase of your life. As you can see on the screen is the disclaimer. Simply read it right now. I can send it to you, or you can go online to the AmericanRetirementInstitute.com for more information on it as well. This is myself. I've been in the industry since 2004. I'm a Forbes published article author. I also have an author of my own book, Across the Bridge to Retirement. If you'd like to have a copy, a free copy, either a physical one or an e-copy, you can call or text that number or email that to us as well. Been fortunate enough, I've been in a lot of publications between Forbes, Bunny, Fortune, and MSN. These are all things in the last several years I've had articles published in, featured in, and so forth. Me and my company are proud members of the American Retirement Institute, along with the National Ethics Association. Have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, and also members of the Chambers of Commerce. And I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but I am a Michigan-born blue guy, leading blue from Michigan, and an avid golfer. Used to play on the tour many moons ago, but still, it's a fun thing to get out there and enjoy it. So just a little bit about myself and who I am. Very relaxed individual, and so I'm trying to make this as entertaining, educational as possible for yourself. Like I said earlier, I'll be your educator today. I've been in this retirement planning business for close to 16 years. I've educated thousands of people and helped them through into retirement. The purpose of this course is to help you get some basic understanding of what's important as you enter into retirement. I think it's fair to say retirement is a little different than your grandfather's retirement. In the next time or so, we're going to do our best to educate you. That's really why you signed up for this course, and how you can best position yourself as you go into this really brand new phase of your life. Here's things we'll be covering in this course: the state of the economy, debts and taxes, how that might have an effect on your upcoming retirement. We're going to show you some ways to maybe reduce your taxes in the future. We'll talk a little bit about Social Security, what you should be aware of. What is the best way to start to take Social Security? When is the best time to start your benefits, if it's taxable or not? We'll talk a little bit about additional risks that might come up as you get older in retirement, like long-term care. We'll talk about some general retirement topics and subjects that you should be aware of. Then, of course, very importantly, how do we create spending plan, and how can you pay your bills? So where's that income going to come from? We'll talk that all about in today's course. Some of the things, again, we'll be talking about, for instance, is Social Security. Sorry. Some people might be saying, hey, it's becoming less dependable. What do they mean by that? We're going to have a whole section on Social Security. More retirements are self-funded, so what does that mean? Back in the day, we had this term called the three-legged stool, where most people had a pension, Social Security, and then if you needed some additional income, that was going to come from your savings. Today, the landscape has shifted, and really has been a burden becoming on you more than ever. You have to make sure that you've done a good job saving and be able to enjoy the retirement. That's what we mean by self-funded retirement. Healthcare costs are rising. Listen, you don't need me to remind you of that. We all know how to deal with that going into retirement. We have some numbers and studies from Fidelity Investments on that. We'll talk a little bit about required minimum distributions. Really important because most of us, if you're watching this, you probably have some type of retirement plan like a 401k, an IRA, or so forth. And there's a lot of rules that go along with that. When we are working, we've been postponing that tax required minimum distribution till 72 now. You have to start taking some of your money out, even though if you don't need that money. There are rules that we need to follow. If you forget these rules, well, then that can create a problem. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about that the economy is changing as well. How does that affect us? Interest rate, I would say, I don't know if they're at an all-time low, but they're pretty close to being there right now. So the good news, though, if you're borrowing money, fantastic. That debt service might allow you to be paying your mortgage, might be a little bit lower side because interest rates are so low. If you're nearing retirement, how's that going to affect you? And depending on such things as a 5-year CD, where's the future of that interest rate and how does that affect you? And why is it being kept so low by the Federal Reserve? We'll also talk a little bit about the national debt that's continuing to grow at an alarming rate. What does that mean to you as you get in retirement? What does that do to your taxes? Potentially do to your taxes on top of that. We'll also talk a little bit about the buzzword that a lot of people have been hearing a lot. It's called the inverted yield curve. First of all, we'll explain what that means and what that might be in terms of signals going forward. Then the market is continuing to rise, which is a great thing. We should capture all and take advantage of that. We also have to be mindful, everything can change in a heartbeat. Things are cynical, and even good things like the market can rise can come to an end. So how can we prepare ourselves as we go into retirement? We're going to start off with section 1, debt, tough word for me to say for whatever reason, debt and taxes. Here we go, first section, we're going to jump right into it, debt and taxes. What does the national debt problem have to do with your retirement? Think about it this way. If you're running your house, you create a budget. You monitor what's coming in, what's marking it for salary, and what's for spending. Imagine you're making this much, but spending this much. How long can that go on for? Our national debt has exceeded $23 trillion. That's a big word. The debt service that is an alarming number. We're borrowing about 20 cents, 20% on every dollar that we spend for our debt services. To put that in perspective, our 7% equals about $320 billion of interest that we're paying each and every year. And it's projected to be over $650 billion in just 5 years from now. Now take that number, divide it by how many days in a given year. That's about 1.7 billion of interest payments that we need our country to pay. Now, if you're thinking like me, I'm thinking about my house and my business and whatever's most important to us, you have to wonder how long can this last for? I think one of the things that we have to be mindful of as we go through the online course is because the debt is getting larger and larger, it might mean that down the road, who's going to pay for that debt? Well, we might have to be with raising taxes, which at the end of the day, that puts a burden on you. I'm sure you're aware that we recently had a tax cut or tax break. In 2017, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act actually did that. It changed the highest marginal tax bracket from 39.6 to 37%. But at the end of the day, what does this mean to you? There's a lot of numbers, but just understand the taxes that we are paying today. I know you're probably already thinking, I'm paying a lot in taxes, but they're actually fairly low based on the higher marginal rates that we've had in the last 100 years. What it means to you is this: in the next 5 years, we're going to have an opportunity to pay less than what you might pay in the future. Because of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act reduction, is due at sunset at the end of 2025. So on year 2026, we're going right back to the old tax brackets potentially, which as you can see is going to end up paying more taxes for the taxes. For the rest of this course, we're going to show you strategies and ways to take advantage of what is available today. Now, I don't know about you, but I've said this. I pay too much in taxes. I'm sure you've said the same thing. As you can see, this is a snapshot of where taxes have been dating back to the early 1900s. We are pretty low right now. What does that mean? We talked a little bit earlier about the national deficit being about 23 trillion and our debt service 320 billion and maybe going to 650 billion in just 5 years. In order to service that debt, it's possible. I'm not asking you to predict the future. I don't have the crystal ball, but it's possible that these taxes can go up in the future. All we're trying to say is be mindful as you enter in retirement when people say, well, you'll be in a lower tax bracket. That's not necessarily the case. We just got through talking about taxes and the history of taxes and where they are today and how they possibly can go up in the future. This tax map is an opportunity for you to figure out where you are and how does it relate to me. As we go through this course, we're going to talk a little bit about something called a financial lab. Excuse me. Where you can actually take advantage of looking at your particular situation. We're not talking about general numbers, but your individual situation, as everyone's situation is different. One of the things that would be very helpful to see is where you're paying taxes and maybe how you can take advantage of this graduated tax system that we've had maximum certain withdrawals may be in the next 5 years or so. But this tax map is very helpful and a useful tool that we can talk about as we go through. We just got through talking about taxes, so where they're going to be, where are they at today, and where they might be in the future. If taxes go up, we want to make sure that we do the right thing today to maximize what we put in our own pocket. In the next couple of slides, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Oops, excuse me. Here's an example of a tax map where you might fall in. We might want just to say that we're withdrawing money, but hey, I'm not withdrawing some money today because I want to buy a new car, but strategically withdrawing money so it doesn't put you in the next tax bracket. We have a thing called the financial lab. We can talk more about that as the course goes on, but it's an opportunity where you can take this information you learn in the classroom and apply it to your particular situation, and you'll receive your own individual tax map, which is super helpful. As we're talking about taxes, you know how your money works in retirement. Is it taxable? Is it tax deferred? Or is it my favorite one, tax free? Sorry about that. Sometimes the slide thing gets carried away from me. Basically, you'll see the 3 different buckets of taxable, tax deferred, and tax-free income, and relate yourself on this. This is also in the booklet, but you got your savings accounts, your money market accounts, your brokerage accounts, or taxable money. Your tax deferred money is your 401ks, your IRAs, your deferred annuities, and your bonds. And your tax one is your Roth IRAs, your Roth 401ks, municipal bonds, and different types of life insurance. Very, very important to know where your money is coming from going into retirement, which bucket you're in. And having all 3 buckets is a wonderful thing. So let's get a bit more specific. Taxable income. Now, I don't know anybody that doesn't have a checking account or a savings account, so you probably have that. You probably have that set aside for emergencies. Maybe it's 6 months worth of living expenses. I'd like to think it's a little bit more, but every person's situation is different. You might have a brokerage account, which means this. Every year, either you're going to get a 1099 from that bank or from that brokerage company saying, hey, here are the taxes that we've created for you throughout the year. So here you go. Here's that 1099 that you take to your accountant and you're going to have to pay taxes on. Chances are you also have an IRA or 401k plan that would fall into this category of tax-deferred growth. Think about this. Relating to planning and harvesting, would you rather pay taxes on a smaller number? This is the amount of money that you've been put in for instance, if we put in $10,000 at a 30% tax rate, would you rather have paid $3,000 in the seeds or would you rather paid on the harvest? Which in this example, assuming it grows at 6%. Now you got about 100 grand. Many years later, would you rather pay 30% on 100 grand, which is now 30,000? Previously, we talked about the 3-legged stool. One of those legs I'm sure you have is a 401k plan. It's a tax deferred account. Let's look at it a little bit differently though. We've all been taught deferred, deferred, deferred because it's the way you want to be better off. You're going to be paying taxes in the future and it won't be as high as they are today. Well, let's look at this. We'll use the example of these seeds versus the harvest. If we put money in today, let's say 10,000, and you're in a 30% tax bracket, you would have paid $3,000 in taxes. But now let's not do that. Let's worry about the problem later. Let it grow. So it's been growing, assuming it's now $100,000. Would you have been better off paying $3,000 now in the harvest, which is 100 grand, or $30,000? I'm not sure, but there is no right answer. The thing that we need to be mindful is we want to have the balance in every bucket, which leads us into our final bucket, tax-free income. The tax-free income bucket, which I love, we have the money that we paid taxes on. We don't have to worry about taxes in the future. They could be where they are today. They could be twice as high. It still won't matter to us. In addition to that, the money is in here when we get to take the money out, so it does not affect the taxation of our Social Security. So at the end of the day, which is the best bucket? Taxable, tax-deferred, or tax-free income. Personally, I think you want to have all three, but there is no right answer. We've talked about it in the past, and we'll talk a bit more about throughout this course, the word balance. We want to make sure that we all have a good balance of taxable money, tax-deferred money, kind of like your 401k plan, and a little bit more about tax-free money. Now that we've discussed a little bit about taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free, I guess the question is, where do you want the most of your money to be? It's very difficult to say again the word balance, but now that we know that, there's something exists that's tax-free. We might want to take advantage of, and you might not be taking advantage of it. So we're going forward a little bit about right here. We now know that we can actually take advantage of something that's called tax-free in the future. So let's talk a little bit about Roth IRAs. You've heard of the term. People sometimes come to us and say, how does that work? Well, let me show you right now. In 2020, the income threshold is $124,000 for a single individual, $196,000 for a married couple filing jointly. If you make up to those numbers, their thresholds, you can take advantage of setting up a Roth IRA. Okay, make sure. Sorry about that. Now there's cutoffs of what you have to do going different for everybody, but the number that you want to focus on is the contributions you can make into the Roth IRA. As a single individual in 2020, it's $6,000, and if you're over the age of 50, it's $7,000. What does that mean? It means we can put money in those. We can put money up to those numbers, and it's going to grow tax-free, as you can see. If you leave it alone for 5 years, as long as you're over the age of 59 and a half, ultimately when you retire, you can pull that money out. That's $5,000 or $6,000 that you would put in of $100,000 you can pull out income tax-free. The best money is tax-free money, in my opinion. It's a beautiful thing that we just want to remember that and be mindful of. As we go through this course, if you're not taking advantage of a Roth IRA, you'll have to learn more and ought to think about taking advantage of that. You know, everybody's situation is different. I think we've concluded that we have tax-free bucket of money, so you can utilize that in the future. And that's a wonderful thing, personally. So I urge you to encourage yourself to think about more about taking advantage of a Roth IRA. But if you don't qualify for a Roth because you make too much money, there are opportunities, as you can see, a backdoor Roth IRA, where you can actually just set up a traditional IRA, then ultimately convert it into a Roth. I've been doing those a lot lately, and it's very powerful. I just want to again encourage you to maybe take advantage of this in our lab series, where we can sit down with you one-on-one, take a look at your particular situation. And if you don't have a tax-free bucket, let's take a look at it and let's create one for you. Now we're going to shift gears and talk a little about required minimum distributions. That's a mouthful. Also, I'm just going to use them as RMDs. What is it? What does it mean? Does it affect me? If you have a 401k plan or any other IRA, the year that you reach 72 now, that the law just passed on the Secure Act, you're required to take out a small percentage of that money, even though you might not need it. The reason being is you've never paid taxes on that. So the IRS is not going to forget you. And the rule, as we know in the past, at the age of 70 and a half, or the year that you turn 70 and a half, you have to start taking out some of that money and start paying taxes on it. Now, there are some exceptions that will allow you not to take money out, but we want to be very careful and follow the rules and regulations correctly, because if you don't, the penalty is 50%. Let's take a look at this example. Let's say you're 70 and a half years old, and you have a $200,000 401k plan. You're now retired. You didn't need the money before, and now you said, well, I know my RMD is supposed to give me about $10,000, but I don't need $10,000, so I'm only going to take $5,000 out. Well, guess what? Your penalty on that amount, that extra $5,000 you were supposed to take out, is 50%. In this example, you're now paying a $2,500 penalty for not taking out your full amount. Maybe you could just completely ignored it, or you forgot to take it out entirely well, but 50% of that $10,000, so the penalty would be $5,000. That money adds up. It's a lot of money. We just want to make sure you're careful to follow the rules of RMDs. Now, the good news is there's something called the Secure Act that was passed in Congress by 2019 and written into law shortly after. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on that really make the whole situation better for Americans saving for retirement. But one of those things is changing the RMD age to 72, which gives you a little bit of a break. Going back to RMDs, those three magical little letters, it's very important to understand what they are and are the rules that go along with it, that you have to follow those rules. I know I've given you a bunch of information. This is just where I would like to encourage you to take a look, pause, and look at your particular situation. With our help, we can do a financial lab. Take a look at your particular tax situation. Should it be tax versus tax-free, too much in tax-deferred? But if it's on us or somebody else, pause and make sure that you're on the right track. If you look at the screen, this is what the tax map software looks for. It plugs in all your information, and then it creates a map on the right, and it's a full 18-page report about opportunities, where to take your money out before you hit the next tax level, and so forth. And then with the Medicare jumps, if you're over 65 years old, this will show you how much money you can take out prior to that before you hit the next tax level. I'll grab some coffee here. Give me a second. Excuse me. Very valuable information, and again, it's complimentary in the lab session. So now we're done with debt and taxes. We're going to move on to one of everybody's favorite topic recently, and that's section 2. That's Social Security. We're going to talk a little bit about Social Security, but let's talk about the history of Social Security first. The first check was cut in 1940 for $22.54 to an Ida Mae Fuller. You hear today Social Security might not be around. Is it taxed? Is it not taxed? Well, let's understand why it's changed a little bit. Back in the day, there were 41 people for every person retiring. In addition to that, people didn't live as long as they do today. Here we are in present day, and there's only about 3 people, it's actually 2.9 people working, putting money into Social Security for every 1 person working. The whole system is just too much strain. But then back in the 80s, in 83 to be precise, Congress passed into law and said, hey, look, we're going to have to start taxing Social Security. So we're going to tax up to 50% of your Social Security benefits, which originally, when it was designed, was to be tax-free. And then again in 1993, they taxed it up again and looked at the current number of 85% benefit of your taxable income, meaning you can pay taxes on 85% of that benefit income. Now, let's look at that. That's just a big difference. How many people are paying for retirees versus today? So you might be wondering, is my Social Security taxable or is it tax-free? Well, that really depends on your provisional income. What is provisional income? Provisional income is your adjusted gross income plus 50% of your Social Security benefits, plus any tax-free interest, which makes up and determines where you fall. This example of Joe and Ann have a total of income of $100,000. As you can see, they're over the threshold of $44,000 number, which means 85% of their Social Security money is taxable. And there's the breakdown. In the eyes of the government, once you're joint, you make over $44,000, you're considered extremely wealthy in their eyes. So you're paying 85% taxes on your Social Security. Personally, I don't think it's fair, but I don't make the rules, unfortunately. So let's just take a closer look. Joe and Ann, they weren't expecting to pay taxes on their Social Security, but because their total income, provisional income, was $100,000, that means now that 85% of that $40,000 tax Social Security check that we're going to get, that they thought was going to be taxable, is not. At the end of the day, this is an example. You can see they're losing $7,480 to taxes. Now you can imagine going in retirement if you think you're going to get this much, but all of a sudden you're going to lose almost $7,500. What are you going to do? Another common question is, when is the best time to take Social Security? You might be wondering yourself, when Social Security was created, full retirement age used to be 65. Today, for most of us, it's 67 years old. And there's the chart on the right-hand side that explains the benefit reduction and the age of full retirement age. So when is the best time? It really depends. It depends on how long you think you might live. Like, what age did your parents live to? A lot of things go into that factor. Sometimes we see people and they actually say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take it out and run because I heard Social Security might be going broke. In fact, the Board of Trustees of Social Security came out and said recently that by the year 2035, we're on track to be able to pay only 75% of the benefits of Social Security. You hear that and you're like, oh, shoot, well, at 62, I might as well take my money and run because it's not going to be there in the future. At the end of the day, you really need to take a look at the analysis on your particular situation as when is the best time to take Social Security benefits. We've done previous webinars and you go and check them out, that a lot of people that take, there's about a 14 to 16 year break even point, depending on when you take out Social Security, from 62 to 66 to 70. So it's something really interested by every person's situation counts and is different. So we're always talking about, how do I maximize my benefit? There's opportunities for somebody. You might have an ex-spouse. It's not just based on your earnings history, but given the criteria, there might be opportunities where you can actually get a larger benefit. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but if you do have an ex-spouse, you might want to take a screenshot of this, or I believe it's in the book, that if you're at least 62 years old and you're married for at least 10 years, and you're not remarried, you're entitled to their benefit if it's higher than yours. While you can increase that amount of your own primary benefit by delaying filing up to the age of 70, you cannot claim spousal benefits that exceed 50% of your filing maximum benefits. It's just something that Social Security hasn't mentioned to you, but there are things in Social Security through analyzation reports that can tell you that, are you maximizing your Social Security to your full value? Again, with the financial lab, one of the things that you can do is take a look at your own particular situation. Like this example here, where you can see and have a Social Security analyst run in your particular situation. We would take your numbers, your Social Security benefits, projections, plug it in, and a lot of things are different, like longevity and how much money has you been saved. Maybe we can take these monies from elsewhere between 62 and 70. We can give you a report based on your particular situation, that when is the best time to take Social Security and maximize your benefits. Now we're going to go into section 3, which is additional risks in retirement. We're going to jump right into it. Additional risks in retirement. One of the things we hear a whole lot about is, hey, healthcare costs. It's so much money. Well, what is that number? Well, according to Fidelity study, in retirement, you'll spend about $285,000 in healthcare benefits alone. 7 out of 10 people will spend some time either in their home, in healthcare, or in a nursing home. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. 7 out of 10 people are going to spend some time in a nursing home. Are you prepared for that? So traditionally, you're turning your long-term care benefits in ADRs of bathing, personal hygiene, dressing, eating, toiletry, walking. These are ADLs. If you don't have a list of your ADLs, a lot of these things will turn on your long-term benefits for yourself. And how do you protect yourself from that? How do you protect yourself? As we talk about long-term care, here's a glossary of terms that are going to trigger if you have a long-term care policy. These things will trigger your policy. If we already talked about 7 out of 10 people, 70%, will need some type of long-term care in their retirement years. It's an average cost of $90,000 a year. That could be a gigantic number that you just want to be mindful for. And are you ready for, where's that money going to come from if you or your spouse do get put into a long-term care facility? You probably have life insurance, and as you can see, life insurance comes in many different forms. Many of us think about, well, we're going to have to take life insurance because someday we're going to die. Well, today you can actually utilize some of these life insurance policies that may help you pay in some of these long-term care costs. Many of these policies do 2 things for you. You can have a policy pay dollar for dollar, but have it work. And the other risk in retirement is premature death. We want to make sure a plan is properly created for you. Now, we all know about life insurance, and there's many different types. You got term life, universal life, whole life. One of the things that people can benefit from today is creating insurance policies where you can almost, I guess, I'll just use the phrase, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You can use that life insurance policies to help your family in the event of an ultimate death, but also use those benefits you need for long-term care. Many of these companies will allow you to actually utilize that policy before you actually die, pay for those long-term care costs. That's why having agents like we have a life agent here in our office, Jeff Connors, who can explain all this stuff to you during the lab session on how you can actually utilize your life insurance policies towards long-term care. So we get this asked all the time. Should I have a trust, or is my will enough? Well, I think, in my opinion, one of the best gifts you can give your family is a properly structured estate plan. They don't have to worry about, hey, how am I going to get this to the kids, to one of my spouse? Is this going to go through probate? Well, if you have a properly structured estate program, which is, in this case, maybe it's a trust, it's going to really help you to do those things at much more efficiently. Because you have the will, the living trust, probate, and the power of attorney. So the difference between a will and a trust is a will is court controlled. It typically will go through probate, most times a year or more delayed distribution. It has to be court approved, appointed with an executor, public disclosures of assets, debts, and to heirs, and incurs a lot of probate fees. The benefits of a trust is it's typically court-free. It transfers assets outside of probate. You appoint a trustee, private asides from the trustee, potential tax savings. So at the end of the day, if you look between this slide right here, what is more beneficial? Spending a couple extra dollars on a trust or getting a little basic will? Personally, I think that the answer is on the right side, in my own opinion, but everybody's situation is different. So here's a real life example. Remember the artist Prince? Well, he passed away some 3-4 years ago, and guess what? He's still in probate. His estate has not been settled. It has been going on for his family members. It's not only that, but it's time, aggravation, cost, but also subject to a lot of taxes. Just one thing, if you haven't reviewed your documents, maybe start reviewing with your beneficiary designations. It's a really easy way to make sure what you have today, for instance, maybe like your IRA, if your beneficiary is going to be your wife, well, make sure your beneficiary, it says it's your wife, and have them labeled properly. It's a really efficient way to pass along assets without going through probate. Trust me, over the last 16, 17 years in this industry, I've not had anybody who's gone through probate be happy about it. We just got through talking about the beneficiary reviews in your financial lab, but that's another thing we'll cover. But we'll also have a legacy checklist to make sure that if you want your assets to go to the family in a particular manner, that you need the right documents in place to do that. It just doesn't happen by itself with a piece of paper. So in the financial lab with the legacy checklist and the beneficiary review, it's very, very helpful and important to yourself, as you can see with this, what you're going to receive in the financial lab. Now we're going to move on to some fun stuff, general investing concepts. Let's talk about retirement, investing in money. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the term, don't worry about it, ride it out, everything will come back. Common phase from brokers that will come out with your money, especially recently, if you've looked at the situation. No, just let it sit out and roll away. Well, it will come back. Let's take a look at this. From 2000, after the dot-com bust, you've lost 50% of your money. Now you have made it back, but then all of a sudden, here comes 2008, and you lose 50% again. So if you look at the numbers from 2000 to 2013, you actually just really broke even. So you waited 13 years to get your money back in full. Now you look back now from 2000 to present day, and yes, it's gone up. We've had a great 10-year run, but guess what? Your average return isn't 7, 8, or 10%. It's about 4% rate of return. So 1 + 1 is 2, but can't be anything else. Writing it out. That's what your compounded return average is between 2000 and 2020, because of all those dips. So you take the average return, you have a year where you lose 50%, followed by a year you make 50%. So hey, guess what? Your average is 0. That means in your mind, hey, guess what? I didn't lose any money. Well, your actual return is entirely different, because you have $100,000, you lose 50%. Now you got $50,000. You make 50%. That's only $25,000. So the end result, your ending balance is not $100,000. It's only $75,000. So when it goes down 50%, generally has to go back up 100% to get back to even. What I'm trying to illustrate here is we just need to be mindful when you're looking at your statements and it says the average that, the average this. It's not the actual average return. Let's go back to 1929. Here are a whole bunch of periods of bear markets, as you can see. The average bear market is almost 40%. That's a huge number. You look at the most recent one we just recently had, and that doesn't include what's going on today 100% in this illustration, but from February 7th to 2009, the drawdown from the top to the bottom exceeds 50%. The question is when is the next one going to come? Is it here right now? How long is it going to last? What are you going to do about it? Can you weather the storm, especially if you're nearing retirement? Is that happening now? What is your backup plan? Have we reached its peak, or are we going to go to the next phase? History usually says it's going to continue for a longer time period. Investors live an average of 39.5%, and one bear market every 7 years on the average. We've been talking about the market eating away at your money, and you want to make sure that you don't lose money. In addition to that, we want to be mindful of a thing called fees. Now, if you're going to pay a fee, you might as well get something for it. But if you're not getting anything for the fee, what's the fee there for? There's a fee for everything, but there's a difference between paying too much and paying a reasonable fee. As an example, if you pay too much by, let's say, 1% a year, what does that mean? Well, it means in retirement, you've had that money that lasted probably another 10 years or so. I think it's fair to say how much financial products have fees that you're paying too much money for. That's one of the things that you want to evaluate. Just think of it as like a carpenter ants in your house. You don't see them eating away at the 2x4, but they're slowly eating away at the foundation of your house. God bless them, this doesn't happen to anybody, but just using this as a scenario. You just want to make sure that you're examined in a particular situation. This example shows that you're paying too much in fees, let's just say 1% a year. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but at the end of the day, that money could have been used in your retirement. You could have had enough money to last an extra 10 years. There's just a fee structure at 1% of how much you're paying in fees. It also should be in your workbook, but it's a lot of money. We've been hearing this a lot lately. You may have heard of it recently, called inverted yield curve. And actually now it can affect your retirement and your portfolio. By definition, an inverted yield curve is when a long-term rate of a financial interest rate, in this case, we're going to use the 10-year treasury bond, is actually paying less than, let's say, a 2-year treasury bond, because that goes against conventional thinking. The longer the money, the higher the rate. Well, that's not happening. And it's only happening in adult lifetime about 6 times. And when that's happened any other time, I hate to use that R word, but yes, recession. Last time it happened just before the Great Recession of 2008, and previous to that was just before the dot-com bubble. So there's a pattern growing here. So do we need to be mindful? It's happened. What does that mean? Does that mean that we're leading into a recession? No, not necessarily. But in the past, that is what's happened so much. So history generally repeats itself, but we can't be guaranteed that. So especially if you're near retirement, you need to be careful. We've got through talking about the ugly R word, recession. And while there's no way to be recession-proof your portfolio, we just might make sure that you have diversification to help migrate maybe any potential losses in your future. Because if you have everything in the same place, well, it's great if it goes up, but if it's going down all at once, it could be dead in the water. So we want to make sure that we have a good balance. Certain things go up, but maybe certain things are going up as fast and vice versa. Diversification is really true, important characteristic and aspect of any really good retirement plan. Sequence of returns. What is it? What does it mean? What does it mean to you? Well, in the yellow, you can see we have $500,000. These are actual S&P numbers dating back to 2000. And at the end of the day, almost 20 years later, we have 910,000 with an average rate of return of 4.8%. Mind you, this is no fees attached. Well, that's fantastic. But one problem on the blue, all we've done here is we've taken those exact same numbers and we flipped them upside down and changed the years. So during the accumulation phase, the point of this illustration is to show you that, hey, you know what? During the accumulation phase, you have time, we say 10, 15, 20 years, everything will kind of shake itself out. And the end result, in this case, even though the returns came in a different order, we still have the same ending order of $910,000. So you've basically taken the numbers on the left and the numbers on the right, and just flip-flopped them. And it's amazing that you still come out with the same exact total at the bottom of the 910,000 and change. Again, this is something we run in our financial lab. It's not just about the numbers. This is all about you. You can take everything you've done that we've talked about, and I know there's many numbers and graphs going on, but you can look at what you've done and analyze, say, hey, look, am I on track? Number one, I'm not diversified as much as I thought I was. Maybe I'm taking on more risk than I really need to. The financial lab will really clarify how to see where it is, and maybe there's some adjustments you need to make going forward. And the highest probability of success as you go into retirement. That will tell you all that goes on in the financial lab, giving you those risk analysis right in there for you. The last section we're going to be covering today is income and retirement. Probably one of the most important subjects we're going to cover today. During your working years, you're getting paid, you're working, you're getting a paycheck. Now that you're approaching retirement, it's possibly in retirement with a shift gears and shift these sources to income to maybe one or two or all of these. We're going to help you make sure that you position these income sources to meet your expenses. We think so much about, hey, how did I save enough money? Do I have enough money in my 401k to get through this money? But on the flip side, you have to look at the other side of the board. Some of the things that we don't think about enough is instances like longevity risk. It's just a different way of saying, am I going to live too long? Am I going to outlive my money? We really need to be mindful of that, especially with today's life expectancy being longer and longer. I know my own family, my mom's sister died a couple of years ago. She was 95 years old. I assure you, she didn't think about living till 95 years old, but she did. So we need to be mindful of that. Then we have inflation risk. Just simply things cost more and more. We need to adjust for that as well. Taxes, market risk, all those things come into play when you're figuring out, how am I going to pay my bills? Where am I going to get my income to essentially spend in retirement? We just talked a second ago about market risk. Then we have tax risk and how that really can come into play as you go into retirement. We just need to be mindful and remember that those things really can take away from our ability to enjoy retirement. Another example of risk is healthcare. We talked about that recently and how it can really come into play, especially if you're going to spend, as Fidelity suggested, a little over $280,000 in retirement. Then the other risk, unforeseen expenses. Maybe a loved one, maybe one of your children got divorced, we need to help them buy a new house. Step one is understanding that these are all risks that we need to be aware of. And step two, how do we hedge against these risks when it comes into the picture? Well, you probably remember seeing this slide a little bit ago. It might look the same to you, but there's one column in there that's really important, which is the annual withdrawal column. This example was showing having the same $500,000, having the same returns, starting with minus 10.1 and ending with plus 19.4. In this example, what we're doing differently is we're assuming that you're retired. Now, you're not just going to look at your money, you're going to look to see if your 401k statements, hopefully you're enjoying your lifestyle that you wanted to deserve. So now you're withholding some of your money. Let's say in this example, you're withholding $25,000 to take out every year. As you can see in portfolio A, we start with $500,000. By the time we're 83 years old, well, it's not looking so good. We've been withdrawing $25,000 a year, and our principal balance is eroded down to $20,000. As you can see in portfolio B, just like the previous section, all we've done is taken those numbers and flipped them upside down, the exact same numbers in just a different pecking order. And in this example, portfolio B, still taking out the same $25,000 at age 83, your income is a lot different. It's $477,000. We're keeping our head above water, but not a whole lot to worry about in that aspect. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the sequence of returns in retirement, when you're withdrawing money out, actually has a substantial effect on the underlying portfolio. And on the end result, as you can see here, it's very dramatic. Different outcome, different results. Here are some tips to help you get prepared for retirement and have a successful retirement that we've always dreamed of. One, minimize losses. You know the old saying, it's not what you earn, it's what you keep that counts. We want, especially going into retirement, when you're in the accumulation phase or when you're withdrawing money, you need to minimize losses. These are 6 steps towards a more prepared retirement. Otherwise, we're going to have a portfolio A situation, and it's like the sequence of returns. You also want to earn a reasonable rate of return. Earlier in this course, we talked about an actual return versus an average return. They're much different and something to look into. We've talked about how fees can really eat into your money. Earning a reasonable rate of return is something that we want to strive for. Managing taxation. I think it's proven that you think that taxes in the future would have to increase. Well, why? You got the national deficit we've had to deal with. That old saying, you'll be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. Well, that's not going to be true. So if this is the case, we want to help you manage your taxation. You have to have reliable sources of income, really important. Back in the day, the 3-legged stool, the pension, Social Security, and savings, would draw a little bit from our savings. Well, that's really flip-flop today. It's mostly depending on how much money we have saved, and that is going forward to be enough. Well, probably not. We have Social Security. We want to make sure that we create many reliable, predictable sources of income as possible. You never can have enough sources of income. Have a plan in the event of the market downturn or disruption, or even worse, we go into a recession or another recession happens down the road. Then lastly, very important, not a plan of, well, let me keep my fingers crossed and see if it works. Let me throw against the wall and see if it sticks. Is that really the type of plan that you want to have? It's a written retirement plan that lays everything out that you can actually see and manage your expectations when you go into retirement. And then most importantly, test what you've done to see the actual outcome is your expectation. We've talked a lot about this lab, so what you can expect, it's a complimentary, oops. It's a complimentary roll up your sleeves. Let's dive in and look at what you've done. Is it enough? Is it not enough? What changes and meaningful changes do we need to make? What you'll receive is a very detailed but very simple. You'll have a retirement tax analysis. It'll show you how to best optimize your Social Security. We can look at your individual risk analysis. Are you taking on more risk than you originally thought you were? We'll review your beneficiaries, what you're going to do with your expense analysis, and ultimately see if the income gap is being filled. If so, we are going to give you the income form to fill and meet that gap. And that's really what the written retirement income plan is all about. If you'd like to schedule this lab meeting, you can go to calendly.com/DolphJanis or call or text us at this number here and schedule that complimentary lab session with herself. And fully complimentary, we can do it either virtually online or we can do it in person. You know, I really enjoyed our time together and sharing this information with you all, and I hope you found it productive as well. As I said earlier, it's not your grandfather's retirement, so there are things that you really need to do to give yourself the highest probability of success. There are tools out there to take advantage of, and in this financial lab we're offering complimentary, and I hope you continue this conversation with you sometime at a future date. And I wish everybody 100% safety and healthiness going forward through this pandemic that we're going on. And I truly wish the bless of everybody that came on this meeting today. And I hope you took a few things out of it, and I hope to continue this conversation with you guys all. Again, my name is Dolph Janis. I appreciate your time and everything as well. And be safe, be healthy, and hope to talk to you sometime in the near future. Take care and God bless.